Okay. Okay, so tonight we're having a community conversation on the South Green Barnard Park. Thank you all for attending. We do have a couple housekeeping items to take care of before. We just wanted to set up some of our Hartford Next protocols for virtual meetings. We think before we speak, we listen to each other. We share and respect diverse points of view. We don't attack each other personally. We are guided by the meeting facilitator. We keep our microphone on mute unless called upon to speak. Marion, who is our co-host, will be keeping an eye out. So if you have a question, please raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. We ask you to speak briefly and to the point. We don't dominate the conversation, but allow others to speak. We help each other to stay on topic and on agenda. And most of all, we hope to enjoy each other's company. Let me just my screen. So tonight, myself for Hartford Preservation Alliance and Hartford Next are hosting. Hartford Preservation Alliance has been around for over 25 years, and we advocate, we educate, and we collaborate with everyone that lives, works, and play in the city to maintain and revitalize our historic buildings, sites, and parks. And Marion?
Yes, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Hartford Next is the coalition of Hartford's neighborhood revitalization zones and with the city of Hartford. We were formerly known as Hartford 2000, for those of you who might not know our new name. And we are the collective voice of Hartford residents and stakeholders that are working to strengthen and grow our community. And our purpose is to bring people together to listen, encourage, negotiate, educate, and lead, and to facilitate inclusion and innovation in our communities, all with the purpose of creating an environment that is beautiful, wonderful, and for everyone who wants to live, work, and play within Hartford. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes, and also during tonight's presentation, if you would all please in the chat function, put in your name and email address so we make sure that you're on our mailing list, because we hope this is the beginning of other conversations, not only on the park, but other issues that come up that Hartford Next likes to have conversations about. So we want to make sure we stay in touch with you. So I just want to briefly go over what our tonight's conversation topics are. I'm briefly going to discuss some of the highlights of the history of the South Green. We're then going to have information in regards to the proposed dog park, including various city departments who were kind enough to spend their evening with us. But we also then, towards the end, but actually one of our main focuses is we would like to have a conversation about what your vision for a safe and equitable South Green Barnard Park would be. The focus, we, and I'm sure most, if not all of you who are on this meeting tonight, understand that there are a lot of problems in the park, around the park, in the neighborhood. We're not focusing so much on that, but we want to say, what would a really good South Green Barnard Park look like? What kind, is it programming? What kinds of things could we do? And what resources might we want to ask to have available so that it can be enjoyed by everyone? So that's our main focus of the evening. So the history of South Green Barnard Park. So in 1813, the Commons, as it was called, was laid out by the selectmen of the town of Hartford. We were then mostly a town, a little part of it was a city. And at the time, this was really the southern border of the town proper. In the early 1820s, there was actually the first Hartford County Agricultural Fair was held in Hartford, and the cattle show was one of the features that was held on the Commons. But by the 1860s, the whole area had really been built up and was mostly residential, with businesses extending out down towards the river. In the 1860s, one of the popular things in the spring and the summer were the traveling circuses would come and pitch their tents and hold the circuses there. But by the outbreak of the Civil War, there were already the residents were calling for improvements for the park, and it seems to have been a continuing conversation we've had up to today on what needs to be done. In 1868, Jacob Weideman, a landscape architect who was a protege of Frederick Law Olmsted of Hartford fame, was called upon to do a design by the park commissioners. Weideman oversaw the development of Bushnell Park. He was also the landscape designer for Cedar Hill Cemetery. And his plans were finally carried out around 1870. In 1899, the Park Commission renamed the South Green as Barnard Park in honor of Henry Barnard, who was born, lived, and died right across from the park in what is now Mercy Shelter's home. That building is, in fact, a National Historic Landmark. And part of the significance for Henry Barnard was in the 1830s and 1840s, he advocated for school reform that resulted in free public schooling becoming a standard in this country. And as I said, there's been plans and developments throughout the years. Something that was hoped for but never happened is in the 1920, the Hartford Health Department proposed a public waiting and comfort station to be put in Barnard Park. Prohibition had started, resulting in the closing of saloons. Unforeseen consequences is saloons acted as having the public restrooms for the city. And there was a real dire need for municipal sanitation to provide public restrooms. At that time, just to give you an idea, the comfort stations, as they were called, there was one at the old State House, which was there, I believe, way into the 1970s. But in 1920, the old State House comfort station averaged 27,000 visitors per week. Also in 1983, with the development of State House Square, it was also briefly proposed to move the Isle of Safety down to South Park, to the South Green, but we know that didn't happen, although someone who was unable to be with us tonight has suggested maybe we should take it back and put it back there. And this is just a version of the park that I found in our archives from the 1970s. And many reiterations and plans that we've been able to find. 1992, 2011, the 2013 was part of the Master Parks plan put together by Sasaki Associates. That leads us to today's conversation. So I'm now going to turn it over to the people who are here from the various city departments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can. Okay. And I don't know if we want to go, if Grace, you're on the call.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone, connect with you all. I'm with, as mentioned, the Department of Development Services Planning Division. And some of you may know me from the Reimagine Main Street work, Main Street resurfacing, Barnard Park, other conversations we've had. I don't know if Mary and Marian, you think that it might be helpful for those on the call that might not have seen the past presentation I've done, or at least me showing sharing my screen to show the slide with the proposed design for a dog park. I do want to preface that, of course, you know, this is one proposal, and I know that further along in this conversation, we'll also have the opportunity to discuss alternate or even parallel ideas for South Green.
Yep, absolutely. You can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, so one moment. Are you able to see this right here? Hopefully it's not too small.
Yep.
Okay,
We've
thank
got it.
you. All right, well, I'll be brief because I know, you know, we've got others on the call as well, but just to give you a little bit of context of the space itself, as it relates to surrounding land uses, this is a screenshot from one of our earlier 2020 Main Street Reimagining Main Street plan. As you can tell, we have closer to the park, some residential mixed use spaces, and then as you get further towards downtown, it becomes mixed use and government, and then more commercial related. There have been some changes since this was originally produced. As you can note here at Park and Main, we actually have new residential that has been put into place there. And because Mary has already gone over the history aspect, I'll just briefly touch base on some of the plans that we have used for reference. One is the Capital Parks Plan, which has been mentioned, shown here to a certain extent, where it was noted that 33% of survey takers at the time had said that they visit parks to walk their dogs, but likewise, other park visitors had noted, you know, concerns about off-leash. So providing a dog park would allow for a designated area for canine play. Our 2035 plan, city plan, which was developed in 2020, also noted that you know, having 3 dog parks is one of the strategies located in that plan. A question that we had previously received in past presentations was, what are some of the recommended parks related to that? And it varied from things such as Keeney and Pope to Porter and Charter Oak Landing. So ranging from very large to modest to small, or even smaller than Barnard. All right, this is just to give a sense of the space on where it's located in respect to the rest of the city. A few existing site photos where you may see the current paved area for bus stop seating, some older fencing, the historic fencing that has remained and will be actually restored as part of our streetscape project, some views of the streets itself. Other sites, close-ups of the green, the trees that we are hoping to maintain and preserve, and the circular seating areas on either side of the park. So this is one version of the proposal. The next one will be a little bit more to scale, but just to show visually the orientation of where the proposal had taken a look at. One was not to take over the entire park, but to allow for part of it to be used for open programming. The circular seating area to the south allowed some integrated space for that. In addition, locating the amenities on the north side of the park would actually allow for some shade and use congruent to the existing mature shade trees that are there. So that's just one note as it relates to orientation. Materials and sizing. This is less than 1/4 acre, split between 2 sections, one for small and one for large dogs, with a vestibule to prevent those from dogs from running out as easily. And then the surfacing would also be synthetic turf, not the synthetic turf that many people may know of, but actually a matrix modular option with no infill. It's non-toxic, antimicrobial, and is specifically designed for dog parks to allow for easy maintenance. I do want to note that this area right here, where you have the most narrow point of the park, will be shaved back, as you can see here, to allow for our future Reimagine Main Street streetscape effort. There's a proposed roundabout in this space, so the park dimensions would have been changing anyway due to this change. You can also note that although we are taking back some of this pointed area here, there will be a new curb alignment that extends the park out further into the western part of Main Street. So just as it relates to orientation and then fit into future streetscape options, wanted to show that as well. And then these were a couple options for as it relates to, potential siding, signage, placemaking, amenities, and then having a cross section here to allow for a better view of scale, how it would relate to the average person, dogs, mounds, benches, etc. And then a few fun placemaking creative ideas, as well as the dog fence character, and then our contact information. So this is a presentation that we've been sharing with the different NRZs, and happy to talk more about it here. And then also, this is just, again, a slide that ties it back into the overarching Main Street design that we are currently working on. Separate, please note that the Main Street resurfacing efforts that are going to start this April are different from Reimagining Main Street. What you're going to see out there in the streets starting this month is actually just related to repaving the streets to allow for interim improvements. I do want to make a clarification that that's a different project. So I know I went through those fairly quickly just to give a little bit of context and flavor as to the general proposal. Didn't know if Marianne, you thought that Q&A would happen in between or
Yeah, no,
after?
that's fine. Does anyone have a question for Grace? No one? Okay.
We do have a hand raised. I think it was, was it Kevin?
Demetrius.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dimitri. I'm a Weathersfield resident. I actually live right next to Goodwin Park, so I kind of consider myself an extension of Hartford in a way. So yeah, I do really like the proposal. I do like that you are retaking some of the space that is currently used as, for traffic. Because right now I literally consider the park as an island in a sea of traffic. So I do like that you're actually extending the park and actually making it bigger in a way. My only question is, what exactly are you gonna do with all that space you're gonna be reclaiming? Yeah, not only just at the park, but later on.
So what relates to the park with the curb extension, maybe I should share my screen again so that we can look at that slide together. So right here, this would actually be reserved just for green space along that western edge. There are existing trees here, as you can tell, so this would just be further extending that green space out there. As it relates to the other areas of Main Street, you can actually probably tell from here that we're proposing different islands and medians, landscaped areas both in the circle, around a future cycle track, creating bump outs so that there's, a road diet reduced spaces, traffic calming opportunities. These areas would also largely be landscaped, as of course the space allows. So just letting you know that as it relates to the streetscape aspect, I unshow here that yes, we have a lot of green space anticipated for this area.
Yeah, that's great. And could you zoom in at the rendering you have right now, to the point where the roundabout is? I just really like that the crosswalk over there is going to be really, really shortened, than to what the current like width is the cross right now. And I would just encourage you guys to plant some trees at the new space, at the new curb space that you're going to be retaking. So and even at the roundabout, some more heavy vegetation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for Grace?
We
Hi,
have a
this is
hand,
Kara
Mary.
Capone. Hi, everybody. Kara Capone with Mercy Housing. Good to see everybody tonight. I'm actually glad you showed the roundabout. That was one of my questions. Was around how does the roundabout fit into, because they really do go hand in hand the way the park is right now. It's the street crossing is difficult. And I think a roundabout would definitely be a great improvement to the area. I guess my question is around buses and public transportation. So are there bus stops still planned there? You know, we have a lot of people who use that transportation spot in the neighborhood. And I was just wondering if there was discussions around bus stops.
All right, we have connected with CT Transit, both at the 30% and as we approach the next stage. I think we last touch base with them, I think 2 weeks ago, just to make sure that some of the streetscape changes that were proposed were within the realm of their thoughts. There is some shifting of stops. So there were stops that were previously put here, if you can recall, near the northern point of Barnard Park. Those are shifting down the block so that they're further down away from this pointed area. So I do want to note that those are changes anticipated as part of the transit stop. Hopefully, though, the transit experience will be better, especially as we consider transit shelters. They're working on getting specs for those out. And then overall, just improving the walkability of the space. We're hoping to add pedestrian refuge islands. Those are these things here, again, to shorten that distance, provide some additional protection for folks. So there are going to be changes for transit, I guess, in short, but we're not fully removing it. Rather, we're shifting them and enhancing them.
Thank you. And I just have one more question. So with the new housing that was developed on Park and Main, that's a Spinnaker development, are they allowing dogs? Is there going to be, I'm just trying to gauge demand.
Right. I can't say I know specifically. That actually has come up to just check in with Park and Main to see if they have a pet policy there. So that's a good follow-up question. As it relates to dog ownership, we've also received that question. Connecticut roughly has between 24 to 28% of households that own a dog specifically, so not cats, but the dogs, and that was actually pre-pandemic numbers. Nationally, there have been trends to indicate that dog and pet ownership have sharply increased post-pandemic. So if you just imagine a third of households perhaps owning a dog, that might be a little bit of a helpful estimate. We have to still maybe workshop a little bit of a more back of the envelope approach, because it's hard to get really granular data on pet inventory surveys, for example. So roughly ballpark, if you consider about a third to be a rule of thumb.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mary. Just to let you know, they do allow dogs at Park on Main. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for Grace. Next, I believe we have some members from Hartford Police Department. Is our CSO in the house?
This is Lieutenant Creeder. I'm in the CSO supervisor. I'm here.
Great. So we're just looking for your take specifically on the dog park, on resources available, how that would impact what you guys are doing.
Putting a dog park there probably won't impact on the CSO front or anything, or on any of our quality of life enforcement. Any enforcement around the dog park will probably be handled by our animal control, which I know the animal control officers and supervisor are on here too. So really, I don't see this dog park making any, it's neither way in our enforcement on our side.
Okay, thank you. How about animal control? Any concerns?
Hi, yes, Sherry DeGenova, Animal Control here. Have a lot of concerns. I am not a big fan of dog parks in general, just because of the, you can't guarantee that everyone's animals are going to be vaccinated, or that animals are going to be under control by the owner. And that's from not only personal experience, but professional experience. So I'm not a big fan of it to begin with, for those specific reasons. I think for us, we have a huge caseload in the city of Hartford without a dog park, and I think the dog park is going to bring more problems for us.
I was going to say, oh, sorry. Hi, Joe Morrow. I work with Sherry. I'm the supervisor for animal control. I agree with her in some elements. We do see, I know she deals with it directly more than I do, but we see a lot of unvaccinated dogs. We see a lot of dog bite cases, roaming dogs. It is a very persisting problem for her and the other ACOs. I mean, obviously putting dogs in an area like that, there is probability of a dog bite or a dog fight, or, you know, some element with the amount of dogs we deal with that are unvaccinated, that could pose a threat to citizens and or other dogs. But I mean, that's a concern you're going to have anywhere with a dog park, like Sherry said.
And it also gives an area where people can abandon animals as well. If you check out a lot of the other towns and cities, that's a huge issue where people can go and just leave a dog left in that fenced in area, which then becomes, you know, another issue in itself.
All right, Eric has a question or his hand up.
Question is geared towards HPD. You know, stepping back a little bit, what is the current strategy from HPD on the South Green from an enforcement standpoint? Because, you know, it seems to be a lack of a strategy from some people's eyes.
I know. Sorry, I was just going to say, I'll let Lieutenant Creeder comment. That's his side of town. I know the guys, the CSOs. That's like our bordering area, pretty much what Lieutenant Reynolds and I and Lieutenant Creeder and Sergeant Gustus cover. I know they're out there a lot. I mean, the guys give a lot of tickets, the public drinking, the narcotics. I can't speak for, you know, the vice and narcotics side, but I know we've assisted them several times with surveillance. And there's been a lot of narcotics arrests and whatnot over there. I'm sure the lieutenant probably has a little more on that due to that being his specific area.
Yep, just to reiterate on what Sergeant Morrow said, we do regular operations out there. The community service officers out there on a regular basis trying to take enforcement action, public drinking, quality of life issues, loitering, street level narcotic sales. We just made an arrest just south of the green just I think 2 days ago. We were out there. So it's kind of a targeted aspect to the whole area. Some of the buildings where we know some of these less than desirable behaviors occur. We're targeting those areas. Regular enforcement, our narcotics unit, like Sergeant Morrow said, they plan regular operations where they actually set up surveillance so we can make arrests on the dealers and not just the users that are there. The park is, though, mostly occupied by drug dependent people that don't have anywhere else to go during the day. That's who's in the park. The drug dealers are usually floating around on the perimeters, so that's why we wind up a lot of the times doing motor vehicle stops away from the park, because when we show up at the park, the drug dealers just drive away. So that's kind of our strategy right now. It's a difficult situation. I describe it like any other business plan. People for years have known that's a place to buy illegal narcotics. I can go through and arrest 10 drug dealers in one day. 10 new ones are going to go there because they know it's a place where they can make a profit. So it's really, we've got to change the culture of the neighborhood. And that's what we're working on, but it's like cutting rock with water.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And who is the CSO in that area?
CSO for the park itself is Officer Bray.
Can we just get his information in the chat if possible?
Yeah, I'll get that for you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll enter that before the end of this.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's also in our booklet, Eric. I can send you a PDF flyer with all of the CSO information.
Thanks, Janice.
Anyone else have any questions for Hartford PD? Okay, thank you so much. With us from Department of Public Works is Mike Looney, Director of Public Works, and Mark Dowd from Parks Department. I know someone wants to go first.
Yeah, Mary, I'll jump in.
Great.
It was interesting to see that schematic or that concept of a comfort station or a way station, because Barnard Park actually is kind of a waypoint and has the potential to be a very strong waypoint, I believe, between the redevelopment of the Buckingham area of downtown has been proposed recently, and with Colt Park, where tremendous amounts of money, millions of dollars, have been invested in fixing up the fields there, and that is a very, very active park within the city, particularly from a recreational activity standpoint. I mean, from the DPW side, I guess the two things that impact us are, to a certain extent, the design, and I think a lot of what Grace was showing in the reimagining Main Street with the roundabout on the cycle track, and that extension on sort of the western arm of the park into the travel lane there a bit, the extended green space. That's, I think, going to help make that a much more accessible park. As several people have already pointed out, it feels very difficult to get to and a little bit scary to try to cross all of that asphalt. So I think that's a major thing that helps. And then there's always, of course, one of our primary things is the maintenance. How do we keep up with the park? And what do we do now versus what would we do if there was a dog park placed in that space? On the one hand, it actually, the quarter acre or so oval shape, that's a quarter acre of grass primarily that we would not have to mow anymore. So from that standpoint, it actually reduces maintenance a little bit more. But of course, we have to be cognizant of what sort of maintenance a dog park itself would require, because I mean there could be the possibility of excessive amount of waste from people's dogs. But it all depends on how responsible your dog owners are. In some dog parks, they're pretty spotless because folks come in with their own bags and remove the dog waste, and as long as we have the trash cans nearby and we tip them regularly, it doesn't really become an issue. But I think ultimately, as our colleagues from my colleagues from HPD were pointing out, one of the big issues, whether it's a dog park or just a regular park or some sort of redesign version, is the activity and how we activate that space. As right now, it is basically known as a place where narcotics is pretty prevalent. And I think probably the best way to counter that, on top of the enforcement actions that are already being taken, is being much more aggressive in the programming of that space. The way you change the culture is that if you have enough events, enough uses of a positive nature in the park starts to get known for that, and you kind of can turn the culture around by making it known for something else and something more positive and fulfilling for the community. So from a maintenance standpoint, it doesn't have having a dog park there doesn't really have a huge impact on us. You know, Mark, if you want to weigh in and tell me if I'm wrong or not, but yeah, whether it's how it is now or with the dog park component, the maintenance isn't really a big difference for us. But what would make a very big difference, whether there's a dog park in there or not, is changing that culture and changing the activity and the use. We actually, you know, we struggle with that. Our guys go in there to mow and to clean up the trash, and you know, they come across you know, a lot of things that are pretty negative. You know, finding needles, just folks being occasionally confrontational when our guys are trying to clean, to the point where we've gotten some assistance from HPD, which we appreciate. But I think that's really the key component of this park, is the programming and changing the nature of the use. I don't know, Mark, if you want to jump in on the maintenance side a little bit with your own thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think you covered it fairly well. I'm confident that if it does become a dog park, that the department would be able to service it in a professional way, keeping it clean for the you know, for the users. It is a difficult park to maintain now due to the, you know, sometimes the people there, but either way, we'll take care of it and continue to. And that's all about I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mike or Mark? Donna Swar.
Hi, you know, I am on the, trying to lower my hand here, sorry. I am on the Park and Rec Advisory Commission, and absolutely activation of all of our parks in problematic areas is the solution. Just before the pandemic, we had a group come to us willing to provide, I'll say, activities on a regular scheduled basis, which was a peace center. And they had made a very crude design. But at that time, they got a lot of support. At the time, South Green was still able to pull a group of people together, the former NRZ, and we were in favor of it, as well as PRAC voted in favor of it. And I think that there are other options for activation. My question to DPW, sorry, was that the maintenance, I have issues concerning how to keep it clean. My understanding is there's artificial turf, and the concept of hosing it down, I think causes a health hazard. I don't think it is a safe a way to clean the area. And based upon my experience in Colt Park, it isn't without a great deal of vigilance that you get dog owners to pick up the dog waste. And I'm not saying we have solved the problem in Colt Park. I'm just saying that my experience has not been that Hartford residents owning dogs pick up after their dogs. That's all.
Well, I do agree with you, Donna, that vigilance is key. You know, you do have to really keep an eye on that component. I mean, we encounter quite a bit, and Mark can probably attest to this. We encounter quite a bit of dog waste in all the parks that we service, where, places that folks take their dogs currently. Again, the artificial turf does present some challenges from that perspective if we have to clean up a large amount of waste. But yeah, I agree that vigilance is very important.
Thank you, Donna. And Kara Capone.
Thanks. Just a quick question. I've noticed I don't know if it's a formal or informal dog park that's on the corner of like Buckingham and Maine. There's that small little sliver of land that people tend to use. That's an informal one? Like, that's not an actual dog park.
That's right. That is an informal one.
Right.
On that, was it the South Downtown NRZ that put up? Had something to do with that?
Yes, it's South Downtown NRZ, and they provide bags so that those who are astute enough will use the bags for the waste, but they try to maintain that.
Great. Any other questions for Mark or Mike? Seeing none, Health and Human Services is in the house.
Hey everyone, Liania Arroyo, Director of Health and Human Services. This is a new area to us, and I also have our environmental health director on as well. This is a new thing for us to look into. We know that there could be some health concerns around dog parks, but if properly maintained, they can also be a place of enjoyment for dogs and for their owners. So it's something that it's really for us would be about the maintenance of the park and ensuring as well, as has been said by our ACO around vaccines, which is going to be challenging to enforce. That would be our biggest concern, particularly around big things like rabies would probably be the biggest thing for us. But again, in terms of the dog park itself, there being one there outside of people, how they handle their dogs. If it's well maintained, we believe, and from at least the limited research that I've done in reading, that those other health risks can be mitigated as it relates to that. More around the behavior of dogs and bites and the potential for rabies would be our biggest concern.
Yeah, this is Liz Kavanaugh. I can echo that also, that rabies, we do always have reports every summer of rabies of dog bites that may or may not be rabid. But also that area per se does have a rather heavy rat infestation. So and it's not just the park, it's also kind of like in the surrounding area. So I mean, there's a lot of work that would have to be done to kind of keep that in check. If you're talking about, I'm not sure if you were still thinking about rinsing off the artificial turf. I think that came up earlier. And is that how that would be cleaned? Is kind of a rinse off into the sanitary, into the drains?
This is Mark.
Yep.
I'm not exactly certain how we'd handle it, but I'm sure we'd use the best practices out there. And the few designs I have seen, it had water source right there for the maintenance of the park.
Okay, so you could hook up a hose, except maybe in the winter, when everything's freezing. All right. The other question I had was like the actual turf itself. And I looked into that a little bit. It looks like there are better, more expensive ones that hold up longer. And, a lot of times the artificial turf, it kind of falls apart. So I don't know who would spec that out and that kind of thing.
I would leave that to the architects, and I'm sure they would go with the best that the city could recommend.
Mhm. Okay.
And appreciate those comments, Liz. And on the topic of the turf, I know we had briefly chatted about different options, and this one is specifically engineered for dog parks. And like I think some of the other options, it is similarly antimicrobial, and this one doesn't have any infill. It's a matrix. So I think it's a similar product to maybe others that we've chatted about.
Okay.
I see Donna has her hand raised.
So getting back to the water flow off of the turf. Has anybody looked at it from whether we're violating stormwater? What we're putting in the drain? Is that in violation of I'll say state code?
I know MS4 has a section about dog waste and education. Off the top of my head, I can't say whether there's a regulation on actual inputs. I think the thing is that the waste one, there's the separate waste dispenser station, and the collection of the waste, that we can look into more discussion as it relates to waste and maintenance. I'm sure the water aspect also helps as it relates to just the, the stickiness, things like that nature, and then, forcing the waste into a centralized area.
I think it would also depend on the design too. There's probably ways you can orient the design. And again, this was someone who regularly designs these and has an architectural background, probably speak to it a little bit better. If the water runs off into an adjacent grass area and then goes down into the soil as opposed to sheeting off I think you'd have to really be using quite a bit of water to sheet it off the sidewalk and then down over the curb into the catch basin. But as Grace pointed out, there is a section on MS4 regarding that, and we'd certainly look more into that.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for any of the city officials? No. Well, thank you all.
There is a
Oh.
comment in the chat from Kevin Sullivan. I don't know if if he's still on and he wants to speak.
Okay, no, I don't know if he's still on the call. We will download the meeting chat for city officials that are here to get comments back to them. His was mostly on traffic around the park.
Yeah, Mayor, I think actually this may have been looked at. I don't know if Grace can confirm, but I think we did look at some point in the past at removing one of the arms, whether it be the main / Weathersfield arm or the main / Maple arm. And I think it caused some traffic complications that kind of made the situation worse from a traffic standpoint.
Yeah, I think the Sasaki plan had a suggestion of just closing off whichever street that is. I get them all confused too. But I can see that with the ambulances and fire and everything, it's not easy. None of this is easy. Not saying that it is. So thank you all for that. I'm going to share my screen. Well, I'm not going to share my screen again, but so the other part that we want to spend time with now is, and again, to reiterate, again, also, if you came a little late to the meeting, make sure that you put your email your name and your email in the chat so we can make sure that you're on our mailing list for what we hope are future meetings. Not only on this park, but anything else that comes up of interest in Hartford. But to talk about, and again, we know there are issues with the park in particular, with the surrounding neighborhood, problems with the surrounding neighborhood because of the park. But what we wanted to have a conversation about is what would be your vision for a safe and equitable park? And I would really like to hear from the people who are, I know there's some people who live in the neighborhood, people who are working in the neighborhood, especially it's what would be like a good day to walk over to the park? What would that look like to you? What would you like to see happen? Anna.
I'm sorry, I was waiting for somebody else to raise their hand. And I just don't see people jumping on board. So as I said, what I remember is the Peace Center coming to us with the concept of games tables, and then having programming around chess tournaments. That was the one that I can remember, but they had a multitude of other ideas. What we frequently see in the park are groups of people who feel that the area is a good one to distribute support, be it health support, be it food, clothing, a way to disperse information directly to a group of people they feel is their target audience. And what I have seen are some really well organized and some really horribly organized efforts. And I think that when I walk down there and I see I call it a mini festival, because, you know, you certainly, and it's obviously has to be for the people who live in the area, because everyone has commented how hard it is. Nobody would try to park, and get to that that triangle, because it is so crazy to cross the traffic. So those are my, I call it happy days. I live 5 blocks away from South Green, and I walk by there, I will say weekly. I drive by there constantly, but I walk by there weekly. And so when you're walking, you get a very different view of the park than if you're driving. And my perception has always been that it is the bane of the South Green to have all of those bus stops, because it is then made into a gigantic bus stop. It hasn't been used for other purposes, really, because of that. And so I was really hoping that the bus stops would, some of them at least, be moved off of there, but the new design doesn't take that into account. So I was pretty disappointed. But getting back to that piece of property, the Peace Center is located very close by. And so organizations that are close by that provide support services, I would like to see those organizations try to do some outreach in the park on, I call it a scheduled basis, so that we would have people coming into the park with some combined, I call it support services and fun activities. That would be my happy day.
Thank you, Donna. Valdez, the broker.
How's it going? My name is John Valdez. I'm the owner of 48 through 54 Main Street, the corner of Main and Willis. So, you know, I get front row seat to everything that goes on at Barnard Park. You know, I'll be honest. So I've owned the building for 3 years. I haven't done much with it because of, you know, the vandalism and everything that's going on, the the loitering. My experience with the people that that take part in those services that she was speaking of, typically just post up in front of my or on my porch, and they'll eat their snacks and the food that they get from those services, and then they'll
With the
they'll
Easter
do
egg
drugs.
hunt
What's
and,
that? Can
and
you hear me?
everything. So like, yeah.
Excuse me?
I think somebody's just speaking off of mute.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, so essentially, you know, what I would like to see, you know, it would be nice to see that the park be utilized by the people rather than dogs. I did like the concept of the dogs, but then I thought about, you know, a lot of the people that already use the park, you know, I don't know, uninvitedly, I guess would be the term, because they're a lot of them are drug dealers and whatnot. Aside from that, them bringing their dogs wouldn't be really helpful. And it would just be a disguise for them to do what they're doing right now. So, you know, I talked to some people to get some ideas as to what they would like to see. Someone mentioned a farmer's market, small shops. Someone mentioned the gaming board already, like chess tournaments or whatever. Food trucks, something comparable to like the Red Steps that would actually bring in visitors to that central location, like New York. Pickleball courts was another thing. So I know I'm just spewing off a lot of ideas, and the implementation. Excuse me for the baby crying in the background. The implementation of these ideas I know are going to be challenging, but I want to say there should be something done, considering it's a major corridor in the city of Hartford. And the usage that I'm trying to make with my building is a co-working space to kind of complement, you know, the building diagonally across the street, Main and Park. So, you know, I really would like to see something specifically, you know, police patrol at the very least, just like one cruiser go by, because these people are literally just dealing drugs right in front, and not only dealing drugs, but using them. And it's sad, because it's like, I look up the traffic count and it's 37,000, and not one cop car sees any of this. It's ridiculous to me. And the fact that we're paying high taxes for all that, you know, we're not getting anything. It's sad. So, you know, that's my piece in it.
Thank you, John. Eric.
Thank you, Mary. Kind of just piggybacking off what the last speaker said, you know, South Green has a unique location in the city, you know, the gateway to the south end of Hartford, you know, the gateway to downtown, you know, and then also consider the gateway to, you know, the Latino and Puerto Rican community on Park Street, you know, and, you know, kind of what the last speaker said. I think, you know, from our standpoint, South County Green, you know, we are on the green to a degree. You know, I think, you know, it's a dog park, if it's a regular park, I mean, tomatoes for us. I mean, I think ultimately this all goes back to an enforcement issue, you know, where there's a presence of an open air drug market within the South Green Park. And there's no denying that. And I know HPD has their hands full, and it's not their fault. It's not, you know, it's socioeconomic issues. You can go on and on. But I think this all comes back to, you know, what type of enforcement are we looking at down the road?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I'm going to step in. I am so happy to see that Spinnaker has developed the properties at Park and Main and bringing in new tenants. And there's always more development, I think, that's been talked about within that area. And so I think we need to think about how do we make it inviting for those who are thinking about living. I mean, Hartford Hospital has a campaign to have people who work there live in the neighborhood. And so anything that can be done to make this an inviting place would be a bonus. I mean, this is the historic town green, and we're not treating it with respect, and we're not elevating it. And I think we need to figure out how to do that. And I guess the enforcement and getting rid of the element that keeps other people away would be a start. But I think with very limited green space, I think we need to think how we can use that 1 square mile for those individuals within walking distance, 5 blocks circumference of the park, to make it accessible to them.
Thank you, Marion. I know I had invited Carrie Shea from Frog Hollow to attend tonight, but unfortunately she had a conflict. But what I wanted her to speak to is Carrie and a couple of people from Frog Hollow have started a Friends of the Zion Hill Cemetery, and all volunteer. They make very good use of Love Your Block grants. Thank you, Janice. It's amazing. But I wanted to throw out there again for future discussions, but is to consider, I think every park in the city could use a Friends of group, but especially if something like this is being proposed, being able to facilitate organizing a Friends of that would get the people in the neighborhood who are actually living and working there involved. I know in some research I've done on the dog parks that American Kennel Club has a best practices, really good guide. And one of the things is that it's really necessary, if you're going to do a dog park, that there should be a Friends of group that can help with, especially with cleanup. This is going to be an everyday cleanup that someone from parks has to be there at least once a day cleaning up, because we don't have a good record in Hartford with the culture of people cleaning up after themselves, beyond the other issues of dogs being vaccinated and leashed. But something I just wanted to throw out there. Anyone else? So again, make sure you have your name and your email in the chat for us. We would appreciate that. And this was good. Okay, so if no one has any more comments, questions, we appreciate you all coming out this evening. Hopefully all of you have a day off tomorrow. And it's hopefully good. And my iPad just dinged. Yard Goats opener is beginning now for their home day. So again, thank you for coming. We will make sure you're on our mailing list if you're not already, and we hope to continue this conversation going forward.
Yeah, and I will reiterate that. Thank you all for joining us this evening and sharing your information.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.